All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today, we are going to be talking about the beginning of the end of the Civil War. All right. I say the beginning of the end because this is where the basically things are starting to come to fruition of who's actually going to win the war. Right. No one's won it yet, but it just the tide looks like okay, this side's going to win. Okay. So here's your warm up picture. The first question asks you to analyze the picture and explain what is going on. Explain what it appears that each guy is doing. So if you want to, on your paper, put like um, the guy on the far left, put in number one, guy number one. The guy going towards the right, guy number two. The other guy, guy number three. Then that guy on the chair with the little like brush, guy number four. Tell me what each guy is doing. What does it look like they're doing? Does it look like they're tearing the map, putting it together? What do you think? What does it look like to you? Okay. The second question says, based off the picture and how the map looks on there, do you think the artist is trying to say that the country is completely torn and it can never be repaired? Or do you think that it's the artist trying to say it can be remade and there's people trying to do that? All right. So what do you think? Okay. So pause the video, write your response, okay? Because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So here's one of the most famous myths about Lincoln. The myth is that he wrote the entire Gettysburg Address when he left the White House to go to Gettysburg. That's not true. That's the myth. The fact is, Lincoln did already have the speech prepared. But what he did is he made corrections. He was rereading it and going, you know what? That's no, let's change that to this. Let's change this part to this. Lincoln was notorious for that. You know, writing a speech and having it, there in paper, and then he rereads it once, twice, three times, five times, and he goes, you know what? No, no, this, let's take this off. Let's add this word, or let's get rid of this whole sentence. Let me add this part in. He was notorious for that. He did it all the time. So that's the truth. Now, again, Lincoln is one of the greatest speakers of all time, right? The words he used, the mannerisms, the emotion he puts into it, it captivates people and it makes people feel a certain way. And he holds that in his hand. If he wants people to feel hopeful, he has that speech. He could do that. If he wants people to feel happy, he could do that, or laughing and things like that. He is again a really good speaker. With that being said, the Gettysburg Address is arguably one of his greatest speeches, and it just so happens to be one of the shortest. All right, it's only about like 2 minutes long. He's up there talking and deliberating, giving his speech. People, hundreds of people are there to listen. People in the back, they can't hear. They're like, "Oh, shh, hey, Lincoln's up there talking." Shh, shh, shh. So by the time the whole back area stops talking, the speech is over. People in the front are already making their way, to leave, and they're like, "Hey, well, what happened?" People in the front were like, hey, "Oh, Lincoln did a speech already." What? He gave a speech already? Yeah, yeah, and it was really good. Oh, you should have heard it. You know. So this is the Gettysburg Address. 4 score and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation, or any nation so conceived and so dedicated, can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But, in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, We cannot hollow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note, nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus so far nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here, dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take on the great task. From these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. All right, so here's your first question. After hearing the speech, why do you think it was considered one of his greatest? So again, if you don't want to hear me read it, again, just put it on mute or pause it and read it for yourself. If you want to hear me read it, by all means. It wasn't the greatest way. I messed up a little bit here and there, but still, tell me why. After hearing it or reading it for yourself, tell me why. Pick out a part that makes like dang, that I can see why people liked it. Look at this part or this part, things like that. Okay. So pause the video, write your response, okay, because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. So, March 1865, General Philip Sheridan overruns General Lee and blocks his retreat. Now, what that is, basically what happens is, usually in a battle, an army will fight one another, bam, head on. Boom, boom, right? Typically what happens is when they start losing, one side starts to lose, they retreat, go backwards. But what happened was Philip Sheridan basically blocks his retreat. So now Lee not only has one group that he was just fighting in front of him, but now he has this other group behind him. 6,000 prisoners are taken at Sailor Creeks. And all these 6,000 men are Lee's men. April 9th, right, 1865, Confederate Major General John B. Jordan did a last-minute offensive attack to basically try to help Lee get away, get free. Okay? It is successful. He's able to make a hole, for Lee to come through, but it's not open that long, and Lee isn't able to escape. And the thing is, you're going to find out that nothing could get in for Lee, meaning like provisions. He was cut off from any type of provision, all right? And he has like thousands of men. Provisions, if you don't know, is basically food, water, or any type of equipment. Gunpowder, bullets, guns, cannonballs, whatever. Those are provisions. So he's cut off completely. He's surrounded. All right? Thing is, he's out of food, basically out of food, almost out of fresh water. Ammunition down to the bottom. No cannonballs. Gunpowder basically gone. Bullets are down to nothing. So Lee realizes, I need to surrender. He, again, doesn't like to lose, but he cares about his men, and he does not want them to die. So he basically tells his next guy, there is nothing left to do but go and see General Grant, and I would rather die 1,000 deaths. He does not want to surrender. Remember, he's the golden boy. But he has no choice. So he sends word to Grant saying, I'm ready to surrender to you. Grant sends a letter back to him saying, all right, we'll clear this path for you so you can come through, right? And then we'll talk at this building. So here's my next question for you. Would you consider a battle over if a corps of soldiers are cut off from provisions? All right, so there's a huge group of soldiers. They have no water, no food, and no ammunition, stuff like that coming to them. Do you think that battle is over? Would you see that? If one group doesn't have anything left, would you be like, you know what? Battle's over. They lost. They have nothing. Or would you be like, no, no, you can't count out anyone till the very end. You know, what do you think? What do you believe? Okay. So write your response. If you don't know how to start the sentence, the writing prompt is on the bottom. I believe a battle is over or isn't over if provisions are cut off because, and explain. Okay. All right. So they meet at the front parlor of the Appomattox Courthouse, which is owned by this guy named Wilbur McLean. Now, last semester, at the very, very beginning of the Civil War, I told you guys in class, I think I even said in the video too, keep that name Wilmer McLean in the back of your head. Because if you forgot, the first major battle that happened in the Civil War was the Battle of First Bull Run, where the cannonball busted through the house and things like that. That house was owned by Wilmer McLean. And here, Lee surrenders. So if you really think about it, the beginning and the end of the Civil War, it happens on this guy's property. So that's a great thing about history. A little twist in faith about stuff like that. Now here's the thing. Lee shows up and Grant shows up and they look totally different from one another. Total 180. Lee shows up dressed in his professional outfit, buttons polished, boots, nice and clean, mirror-like, not a speck of dirt on him, with his saber polished and clean. He's ready, with the hat and the feather, just bam, Pimp Daddy Kane. Grant shows up. This dude got mud all over his pants. He probably got blood on his shirt. His hair's a mess. Shirt's not all tucked in. He doesn't look kept. So you got a total 180 from one another. So before they get to business, they have a little talk, and then Lee basically tells Grant, didn't we serve together in the Mexican-American War? And Grant's like, yeah, we did. Yeah, when we were in Mexico, invading Mexico City. Yeah, you were a scout, and I was a soldier. Yeah. So they chit-chat and things like that about that. Okay. Then they go to business. What are the terms of surrender? Well, basically, Grant has orders from Lincoln. Lincoln basically tells him, be easy on them. Okay? Be easy on them. So when they talk about surrender, Grant says, okay, all the men and officers are going to be pardoned. Okay? You guys can keep any of your private property. So that gun that soldier has, if it's his own, if he brought that from home to fight in, he could take that home. But any type of weapons or ammunition, things like that belong to the Confederacy, you guys need to give that up. Okay? They also said only officers could carry their sidearms, and that Grant said, we're going to give you guys some food. We know you're starving. Your men are starving, so we'll give you guys some food and water, things like that, so you guys can go home. Lee is just like, wow, okay. He was not really expecting this. He's expecting them to be, tied up, taken to a prison and things like that, because again, it's war. It's war. But again, Lincoln's like, be easy on them. So Lee signs a document surrendering to Grant. It's April 9th, 1865. This is basically news shot around the country, and people are now starting to feel this is the end. When Lee surrendered, a sigh of relief came over people like, the war's almost over. Lee is the top general on the other side, the South, and he just surrendered. Basically, the war's over. It's only a matter of time now. All right, so here is your exit ticket question. Remember, you're only going to pick one of these questions to answer. The first question says, taking into consideration all the who died or wounded. So we're talking hundreds and thousands of men who died or had life-altering battle wounds. Arm chopped off, one leg chopped off or both of them chopped off. You know, um, they lost their eye, an eye or two. You know, things like that. Do you think it was worth it? All those men dying and wounded, life-altering wounds. Do you think it was worth all that pain, all that death to liberate and free African Americans? Okay, there's that question. So if you want to answer that, go for that. If you want to answer the second one, by all means. That question is, do you think there is any current issue in our country that might split our country in two, might cause another civil war? If so, what is it? Okay, so if you've been following the news, you might hear something. If again, not even the news, TikTok and Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. There's so many people discussing this news and things like that. What's going on in the world in our country? Can you think of anything, one thing that might split our country? Now, once you finish this, you are done with this lesson. Hopefully, you enjoyed it. Hopefully, you learned something new. All right. So, you guys, you take care. You be safe, and I'll see you guys later. All right.